Number 1. This is only a short story, but one I really want to share. There was this girl who I had been seeing for a few months. I was 21 and she was 24 and had a boy about 2 years old. She was basically normal, had a good job, took care of her kid okay. She was kind of a dim bulb though, not very bright. I was bored in the relationship and really didn't want to become a stepdad to the kid, so I ended it. No problem, right? I run into her about a month or so later at a bar, and we end up going back to her place for a night of sex. Next morning, she makes coffee and breakfast. I go to school and she goes to work. I get incredibly sick on my way to school, and I vomit multiple times. I make it to school, and I'm still puking, so I find the nurse or medical office, and vaguely recall being loaded into an ambulance. It's all blank after that. I come to in the hospital. A doctor tells me that I OD'd on a huge amount of meth and had about 5 minutes left to live before they figured it out. Oh, and by the way, he tells me, there are some federal agents here to talk to you. Turns out, she planned this whole thing and decided that if she couldn't have me, then no one could. She went to jail, but got a reduced sentence for turning on the family member who was making and distributing the meth. Number 2.
In my late teens, I began a serious relationship with my first ever boyfriend. When I was young, I had zero confidence and no self-esteem, and a warped idea of what a relationship should be due to witnessing those of adults around me. Being so shy and innocent, I fell madly in love. I'm still not sure how. From the beginning, the relationship was controlling and abusive on his part, and it still makes me angry now, more so that I put up with it for 5 years. He hated my friends and family for no apparent reason, and I had to really fight to keep other relationships going. But as I got older, I got sick of his shit, and when my family was away for the weekend, I found the perfect opportunity to invite all my friends around for the evening. He tried to put a stop to it with threats and abuse, but I didn't let up, and my friends arrived around 7 p.m. We were sitting in the living room, drinking and chatting with nibbles and music. But all night, my boyfriend was calling my phone, demanding that I make my friends leave and walk to his house to bring him alcohol. My friends soon caught wind of it, and they were already unhappy about me being with him. After a few drinks, I started to ignore the calls, and the conversation turned to my boyfriend. My friends expressed their anger and dislike to him with the usual, "You can do better," "You need to get rid of him," and "He doesn't deserve you." Generally, we enjoyed the evening, and my friends began to leave around 1 a.m. I wasn't afraid to be alone in the house, as I have a Rottweiler. She's friendly as hell, but I was sure she'd protect me. As one of my male friends was about to leave, he stayed behind and gave me a real deep talk about how he felt about my boyfriend, and I agreed with him. I said goodbye and watched at the front door as my friends hurried into the dark and pouring rain to their cars before I went to the kitchen where I had left my phone to charge a little while earlier. As I picked up my phone, something in the kitchen window caught my eye. Standing directly outside my kitchen window in the dark and pouring rain, hooded and angry, was my boyfriend. He was scowling in at me from the darkness. He looked ready to kill. I screamed and we stared at each other for a while. I could see he was mortal drunk, as the whites of his eyes had gone pink, which made him look incredibly freaky as his eyes were blue. He turned away and disappeared. I knew I had to face him. I went out the back door onto the patio into the rain. He was standing a few feet away from me. He was breathing really loud and crying as he was so angry. He bent down and picked up a broken wooden broom handle. I asked him, "Are you going to use that on me?" And he said, "I'm going to hurt you so badly." I didn't know what to do. My heart was racing, but I was stuck in position and quite drunk. He growled and swung the handle into a flower basket above my head, which tipped sideways and spilled soil and flowers down my right shoulder. Then he slammed it on the floor and ran at me, grabbing me around the throat. My dog must have heard him throw the handle as she came bounding out the back door, making an angry snorting sound. She's always friendly and was familiar with him, so I didn't think she'd do anything as he started to strangle me. But she leapt up and took his arm by the sleeve and started to shake him by the arm. Seeing the fear in his face was priceless. He backed off and she calmed down. My boyfriend started to cry and told me that he had walked to my house a few hours ago, sneaking into the house through the back door and hiding in the cupboard under the stairs, where he had listened to every word me and my friends had said about him. I took my dog back inside and I locked the door. When I looked out the window, he was laying on the sun lounger in the rain crying. When he realized I wasn't going back out, he left. The thought of him makes my stomach turn.
Number 3. My mum dated this guy called Jim between the years of 2001 and 2003. He was a seemingly nice guy. Clean cut, had a gut but was easily over 6 foot and fairly built. No children and owned a property in a city in the Midwest. I remember being disappointed when she broke up with him, as he was lots of fun to be around, though she claimed that she didn't want to be with him anymore because he was a smoker. Fast forward about a year later. It was about 1 in the afternoon. My 13-year-old self is playing video games in my room while my mum is at work. I hear our garage door open, and given that we lived in a cozy townhouse, the sound of the door opening was relatively pronounced. I thought it was weird though, as my mum never came off work until about 4 or 5, and she would have called if she was getting off work early. So, I peer out of my window, which directly overlooks the driveway, only to see a silver Audi parked outside. Jim's car. After a few minutes, I'm thinking, shit, why's he at our house? She hadn't been communicating with him at all since they broke up. I don't think he got out of his car, because he eventually closed the door and pulled out of the driveway after a few minutes. This led me to believe that he still had our door code programmed into his car. In the past, he would stay over a lot, so the fact that he had our code wasn't as alarming as the fact that he still had it in his car. Had he come in, it would have been easy for him to hear me upstairs, given the size of our house. I ended up calling my mum and telling her that he had come by and opened the garage, presumably to see if my mum was home. She mentioned that he had recently been bugging her about some bottles of wine that he owned and wanted back from our house. Anyway, she said that she would change the garage code when she got home. But that never actually happened. Fast forward about 5 or 6 years during the summer. At the time, I was staying with my dad. One day, I received a call from my mum, asking if I had been to the house at some point during the day. She was somewhat grilling me because some obvious things like chairs in the kitchen had been moved out of place. My mum is a very particular person and likes to keep everything neat and organised. I kind of laughed and said no because I hadn't been to the house in a few days. I wasn't expecting her follow-up question. She asked me, "Did you put the dog in the bathroom and then pull the chair in front of the door?" This was incredibly odd, and she started to freak out after I still said no. I later found out that her ex never stopped emailing, texting, or calling her since they broke up. There were never actually any wine bottles either. He just kept badgering and harassing her for money. Given that nobody else had our garage code except for my dad, who was out of town at the time, all signs point towards the ex-boyfriend, Jim. It's creepy to think that he still had our garage code after so many years of being broken up and not communicating. It makes me wonder how many other times he might have come by, besides these 2 notable occurrences. Change your garage code after you get out of a relationship. You never know who may come by. Number 4.
First, the backstory. Growing up, my parents were incredibly strict and overprotective. No sleepovers, no boys, no going anywhere without their explicit approval after taking down who I was with, their phone numbers, their parents' phone numbers, and exactly what time I was expected back. And definitely no dates. I rarely even went out with friends. Going to see a movie on a Saturday was a special occasion. The only place I could get around my parents' rigid rules was online, where, because they didn't know how to use the computer, they never monitored me. That's why, in high school, I rebelled the only way I knew how. I started a blog. Yep, I was 17, and I ran an erotic blog. No, not porn. More like photos of myself wearing very low clothing, in bed, everything just so covered. For the purpose of anonymity, because as incredibly dumb and naive as I was back then, I had at least an iota of common sense. None of the photos showed my entire face, just my mouth or my jawline, the arch of my neck, never my eyes. Interspersed with the photos were the blog entries, the life of my amorously blessed alter ego, Claire. Claire was completely fictional, and therefore she was a lot of things I wasn't, primarily social and sexually active. I would fabricate stories of dates, affairs, sexual experimentation, just dumb romance novel type stuff, living vicariously through this confident, beautiful, made-up girl. I fancied myself an alright writer back then, but looking back, it's pretty funny now, because it was probably mostly just drivel. But I enjoyed running it, and my readers seemed to like it. You'd think it would have just been dirty old men, but I had quite a few women readers too, who told me how I was helping them become more confident as well. There was something just so exhilarating about having people be drawn to you online when you're so lonely and cloistered in real life. Anyway, fast forward 3 years. By now I was halfway across the country in college, out from under my parents' rule. I had a few good friends and I was doing pretty well. I still had trouble being very social because I was so unused to it, but at least I wasn't so lonely anymore. I hadn't updated the blog in over 2 years, and honestly, I had mostly forgotten all about it. I also had a boyfriend. His name was David, and we met in a history seminar fall my sophomore year. He was tall, lovely, and kind, and had quite improbably stuck past our awkward first date when I, shy and still mostly petrified of social interaction, could barely string together 10 complete sentences. But he seemed to like that I was so shy. He was, in contrast, outgoing and forward, making friends wherever we went. He would constantly tell me it was cute that I blushed when people talked to me, or say how I should be glad that he was with me to facilitate conversation with other people. One time, he told me I was lucky that he had stuck around because no other guy would have bothered. I was so affection-starved that I was convinced he was right. One day, about 3 months into the relationship, over Christmas break, I got a call from him at home. When I picked up, the first thing he said was, "Who's Claire?" It took a second, but when I realized what he must have been referring to, my entire body went cold. How is this possible? How could he have found out? What? I said. Claire. www.claireblog.com. Is this you? My heart pounded. My mind raced. I had no idea how he had found the blog. Could I possibly deny it? There was nothing on that entire website that linked back to my real name or my real email address. I had made sure of that. None of the photos showed my face, but they showed enough that if you knew me in real life, you could probably be able to tell it was me. Feeling cornered, I told him I would talk to him later and hung up. I spent that whole day on the verge of a panic attack. Finally, I realized I had to just admit it. For some reason, at the time, it seemed like the end of the world that my boyfriend had found my stupid blog from high school. I mean, nowadays I would be like, yeah, I ran a blog and posted hot pics of myself, so the fuck what? It was all just fiction anyway. But of course, I'm older and wiser now, and I was a fucking naive idiot back then. So I called him back, told him while crying all over the place about all the reasons I had written and maintained this blog, and eventually he said, "It's okay, I think I understand." At some point, I had asked him how he had found it, and he told me that an ex-girlfriend of his had seen posts on Facebook of us together, went on Google to search for me, and somehow turned up this blog, the link to which she then sent to David. "Sorry," he told me. "I don't talk to her anymore. She just still bothers me all the time. She's kind of a psycho." I was a little upset at that, but I didn't want to annoy him any further, so I didn't press the issue. Things went mostly back to normal. Then the email started. I woke up to the first one about a week later. It had been sent at 3 a.m. and was from some blatantly fake address, Claire_the_whore_6969 or something like that. All it said was, "You're disgusting." I realized it must have been from David's psycho ex. I was a little unnerved, but I just deleted and ignored it. But the emails didn't stop. They kept coming, at least one, sometimes two a night. Always from a new fake email, Claire the Slut 72993, Claire_cocksucker, etc., etc. Always timestamped exactly 3 or 4 a.m. The contents of the emails began to increase in the level of vitriol. First, it was more of the same variations of "you are so gross" or "you're fucked up." Then she would send me copies of the photos from my blog, which I had deleted right after David had confronted me about it, so she must have saved the entry somewhere, with horrible things written across them like "fat slut" or "die whore, kill yourself," etc. I showed David the emails and asked if he could make her stop, but he just shrugged and said it was out of his control. It kept escalating. She started mentioning my friends' names in the emails. Things like, "I showed Rachel and Alex your sick website, they're disgusted by you." Or, "I told Evan and James, they act like they're your friends, but behind your back they all think you're disgusting." Sometimes she would pretend to be one of my friends and write things like, "I said hi to you on campus yesterday and you think I like hanging out, but I know what you really are. You're just a whore." Once, she copied and pasted an entire blog entry into the body of an email. It was non-stop, night after night. I would wake up in the morning terrified of seeing another email from her in my inbox. I stopped opening them. I was constantly stressed. I never knew for sure if she had actually sent my photos around to everyone I knew. I lost sleep. I lost weight. I begged David to make her stop, but he kept saying there was nothing he could do. Things with David were deteriorating as well. He was annoyed that I kept bringing up the emails. He began to make it sound as though it were all my fault. He said it was hard to believe that I hadn't actually done all those sexual things I had written about. This was the kicker. His ex was from my hometown, he said, and she had told him stories that she'd heard from people I went to high school with about all the dirty things I used to do. Orgies, bondage, hard drugs. How could I lie to him and trick him into believing I was a shy virgin? He wanted to know. I told him none of those things were true. "She's obviously making it up. Do you really believe her over me?" I asked. "I don't know what to believe," he said. He told me I had become untrustworthy. As twisted as it was, I started to believe that too. I apologized to him over and over, until finally he forgave me and told me it was all right, that he believed me, that I was lucky he understood and would stay with me because who else would? I had never been so relieved. I was lucky. I was so lucky. Wasn't I? We had been taking things really slow physically because I actually was a virgin. And regardless of make-believe Claire's make-believe sexcapades, anything sex-related still made me incredibly nervous. But after that, I had sex with David for the first time because I felt like I owed him. He had stayed with me. I was so lucky. I didn't enjoy it. Afterwards, he whispered, "I believe you. You really have never had sex before." It felt sickly, like winning. Eventually, after about 2 months, the ex must have gotten bored because the emails slowed, and then they stopped. David broke up with me shortly after, cruelly and unkindly, the day after my 21st birthday. I was a complete wreck for a while, but hey, life goes on. 3 months or so after that, I got another email from clairebear69@hotmail.com at 3 a.m. I can't believe you haven't killed yourself. You should. For the first time, I responded. We're not even dating anymore. You're pathetic. Get a fucking life. That was the last I ever heard from her. To this day, I don't know her name. I don't know how she found my blog or how she knew the names of my friends or why she was so hell-bent on making me miserable for so long. Even now, when I get Facebook messages or emails from people I don't know, my first reaction is to panic. Of course, I've since realized that I was not at all lucky in my relationship, nor was David the sweet guy that I thought he was at the time. I understand now that it hadn't been my fault. I owed him nothing. It's been 5 years, but I haven't been in a relationship since. I don't know if I could. I think the worst is this. I used to enjoy writing. At one time, I was proud of my blog because, as small and insignificant as it was something I created. Even though it was make-believe, it was still mine. They had taken something I had been proud of and turned it into a source of shame. I don't like to write anymore. Even now I get angry at how they've taken that from me, and how easily I was fooled. How stupid. How naive. Eventually I got the story of their relationship and how they broke up, and why she was so psycho. The details are irrelevant, but suffice it to say, it turns out he had been even more awful to her than he had been to me. But instead of staying far, far away like I have done, all she wanted was for him to take her back. To clarify, none of the email addresses or web address used are real. It was just always something blatantly fake and throwaway like that.
Number 5. A few years ago, I was on the outs with a very dependent girlfriend. What started out as just casual dating turned into her practically living at my house, needing to constantly be in contact with me, and always trying to spy on my social media accounts. She was extremely depressed, and used my sympathy as a weapon to keep pulling me back whenever one of her crazy actions would push me away. It took my stupid younger self a long time to see the pattern. When I finally did, and she realized that she was losing me, she ran over my dog, thinking that the grieving process would bring us back together. The worst part is, it kind of did. The pain of having to drive my dog to the vet and put him down was too much for me to handle on my own, and for once, she was there for me instead of the other way around. Until a few weeks later, when she drunkenly admitted what she had done. I have never been so mad about anything. I was brought up to never raise my hand to a woman, but my morals were seriously tested at that point. I couldn't get the trip to the vet to put the little guy down out of my head. How could this person that I loved have done something so psychopathic? I threw all of her shit out and had to physically remove her from my house. I filed a restraining order, but before it went through, I had to threaten to press charges to keep her away. I haven't talked to her since. I feel bad for anyone that gets caught up in her psycho shit. I thought she loved me, but that really led me to wonder if she was some kind of psycho or sociopath who had been playing me for a fool the whole time. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Special thanks to Eden and Lady White Rabbit for narrating the female perspective stories in this video. I thought that would make things, a bit more engrossing, and given the subject matter, I thought it worked really well. So make sure to check out both of their channels by following the links down below or by clicking on their icons on the screen right now. Stay spooky, and remember, the best things happen in the dark.